Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to WillCast, the podcast with the most creative name in the world. Thanks for tuning in, subscribing, commenting, liking, all that good stuff. I appreciate that as always. Today, Henry K. How's it going?
Good, Patrick. Thank you. Nice to be here. I'm honored to let you interview me. Thank you.
I'm glad we finally made this work. This is WillCast history because this is the first in-person conversation that we've had on the podcast.
Okay.
So it's an honor to have you. I'm excited. You were the first person that I met essentially when I came here to Florida. You drove me from the airport to the academy where I have my internship, and in the car we had some interesting conversations, and we quickly came to realize that both of us loved the podcast format. And so you have a podcast called Rootsland, which
Correct.
is about your involvement in the reggae industry and your music career. And I guess right off the bat, why don't you go ahead and introduce, kind of how you got involved in the music industry and that sort of stuff.
Sure. Yeah. It all comes full circle because, as you mentioned, I picked you up at the airport. Patrick's doing an internship at Everett Academy, and I started out in the music business as an intern. I was a student studying law in Washington, D.C., and I was kind of just disillusioned with politics, with the way everything was going. And it was a long time ago, but everything seems to be exactly the same, And I was just trying to figure out what to do with my life. I walk into a record store, and I know those of you of Patrick's generation may not remember what a record store is, but there were places where they used to sell albums and CDs before you would download music. And I always thought there was something very special about being able to hold something physical. I mean, if you're hacked tomorrow, you lose all your music, but if you have an album or a CD, you can always play that. So there's something really eternal about it. I was looking at a back of a record, and I noticed that there was a company in Washington, D.C. that was a music production and distribution company. So I figured I would just call them and see if they were interested in an intern. And it took me forever to get through to the owner of the company, but I finally did. And he offered me the internship, and I started working. It just so happened it was a reggae music company. He started it out of the basement of his house, and it was what became one of the biggest distribution companies in the country.
And sorry to cut you off. Were you into reggae before that?
Yes, I loved reggae music. I loved all kinds of music, but I think, and I tell this story in the podcast, when I had traveled to the Caribbean when I was a teenager and fell in love with a beautiful girl, and something about the reggae music and the atmosphere and the beach, and it just really connected to me. And as I got older, I connected to reggae because of its consciousness and its lyrics and most of the music I liked was music that had a message to it. Even in rock, it was always groups that were saying something positive or something worthwhile. That always made the music a little bit more interesting to me. So I was always liked reggae. We had a band in high school that we did some local shows for. I played bass, and it was just a dream job. And so when I saw a reggae company in DC, I was amazed, and I pursued it, and I was hired. So
awesome.
And that opened the door. And after which, as I graduated college, I got a job working for the Marley family in Kingston, Jamaica. And then I spent the next 20 years on and off living, working, producing in Kingston.
Awesome. Yeah. It's awesome. Yeah. I listened to your podcast, and it's fascinating. Yeah, reggae music is surprisingly not one of the genres I personally have listened to a lot, but leading up to this conversation, obviously I've been listening to a lot of reggae, trying to, follow up on your podcast, and it's really good. I've been missing out. Like it's interesting how it is the exact opposite of the music that I've listened to the most, which is hip hop, which I feel like is more aggressive and, a street gang, especially nowadays.
Right.
Where reggae is more love to everybody and peacefulness, which is something I resonate with a lot. And so I'm surprised that after 23 years, I haven't gotten into it until now. So,
well, it's interesting because there is the branch of reggae called dancehall music, which we had talked about previously, the Sean Paul, Shaggy. And actually that dancehall, that hardcore, drum and bass, which is more computer generated, like as opposed to the live Bob Marley. It's basically more popular around the world in a lot of ways than the old school reggae music. And so there's the connection between the two there. And as a matter of fact, hip hop, where it originated in the Bronx, Kool Herc, who was the first one who actually started scratching and playing hip hop dance parties, he's Jamaican.
Oh.
And he got the idea of spinning and starting these dances outside from Jamaica, growing up where they had street dances and reggae was played on the streets with DJs clashing with each other. So hip hop culture evolved from reggae and Jamaica, and it's very interesting. And also from that same branch of dancehall, ironically, which is also a very big genre, is reggaeton. Which is the Latin version of dancehall reggae, based on the same rhythms, these drum and syncopated drum bass rhythms on drum machines. So you have hip hop, you have reggaeton, and really EDM all evolved from reggae, because EDM, what happened was in the original reggae music, you had an art form called dub. And dub was instrumental versions of reggae songs. And during the street clashes of Jamaica in the early days, there was competitions, and it was actually an accident. One person went in to press a record on vinyl. Turns out the vocals didn't end up on the record. It was just the music, the instrumental. And they paid so much money for it, they said, all right, we're going to spin it anyway. Okay. Turns out he just started improvising over the mic with the instrumental, and the crowd went wild.
Wow.
He did it 10 times the whole night. The place couldn't stop clapping. They loved it.
That's awesome.
So it invented this art form, and then as these instrumentals became popular, they started trying to outdo themselves with drum and bass and dub and all these effects, and eventually that evolved into what we know now as EDM, all these effects and everything.
That's interesting.
So it all really happened from this one little island, all these major,
That's cool.
art forms that are like going on right now in the world.
Interesting. I didn't know that. That's pretty cool, yeah.
And at the same time, reggae kind of just stayed in its lane while all these things are happening around it.
True, yeah. Do you like any of the newer hip-hop, pop, what we see nowadays with music? Or do you listen more to your generation's music still nowadays?
I listen to a little bit, because I spend a lot of time in the car driving. I listen to pop radio. I can't say I'm thrilled by anything I hear in top 40. I think it's pretty repetitive. It's kind of redundant. I'm not hearing anything new. But occasionally, there are music that I hear out there that connects with me, because I listen to so many different genres. Like from hip hop to like I said, EDM, and so I connect to all music because I love anything with passion and feeling.
Yeah.
And I feel if the music has it, I connect to it.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I think today, just like we talked about, with all the new careers you can get, I think it's much easier today for someone my age or even younger to get a career off of music. You can put it on iTunes, on SoundCloud, on YouTube. So naturally, there's going to be so much new music coming out all the time now, right?
Correct.
Yeah, it's super interesting.
In a way, I had a studio for many years, 20 years. I had a recording studio, and I worked a lot in the studios. And in a way, what technology did is it killed that old platform of recording studios where you'd go in and you'd pay $75, $100 an hour to go in and record a song. And you'd have to get it right, and you'd really concentrate on it. Now you have a laptop and a microphone. You can do that in your closet, and you can put out product equally as good as technologically wise as what you would go in and spend thousands or tens of thousands of dollars in the studio. The downfall of that was, and being someone who's an engineer and worked in the studio, when you went in to record a song, it was very sacred. It's like you were spending your money. You were going to spend $500, $1,000, $10,000 to record a song, so you wanted to get it right. You rehearsed the song. You practiced it a million times. When you went in there, you knew this song backwards and forwards. You didn't want to waste a dollar of your time. Nowadays when people can record in their house, they can sit and they can take 1,000 takes. It can take as long as they want, and somehow I think that takes the element of spontaneity out of it. It takes the element of rehearsal out of it.
Yeah, maybe the passion gets lost a bit. Maybe.
Maybe by the time you sang it 100 times, it's not your feeling, as opposed to going into a studio and this is your dream, and the engineer presses record and you're in the vocal booth and all eyes on you, and you got to get it right. So I mean, there's good technology has a good side and a bad side, because even music from previous to my generation, like the Motown stuff from the 50s and 60s, when you hear it on the radio, it's so melodic and lush and full. And, they were doing things like hanging carpets from the ceiling and, putting tinfoil on the walls to get all kinds of sounds. And it was as low tech as you can get. But the music, I had a guy I used to work for in the industry, and he said, Henry, a hit song's a hit song. Whether it's you spend $1 million and get the symphony on it, or a guy's in his bathroom with a guitar. Yeah. You feel it. It's a hit.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I feel that. Yeah, like you just had to find a way to make it work back then, right? And today everything is so easily available to you. You can just do whatever it feels like, right? So, yeah, perhaps naturally today we aren't as good and as involved in the music because it's maybe too easy for us to make. So we maybe take it for granted what it takes to do.
I think so. Again, it's probably generational, and the older generation's always going to sound like we're out of touch with the younger generation. But to me, it's the difference. The music that's being made today is like playing soccer on a video game, on an Xbox, and you're playing World Cup soccer as opposed to actually being out on the field and playing it.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between music in the old days, when you'd bring a band in and you'd have 10 musicians or 5 musicians in a room, and everybody would have their own opinion and their own ideas, and they would work and they would mesh, and you'd get it right. And as opposed to now, it's a guy on a laptop and he's playing everything. There's no interaction, there's no communication between other people, and you do lose out on some of that.
Yeah, I definitely see that. Yeah, that makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. So how was it working with the Marley family?
It was pretty amazing. Obviously when I got to Jamaica, Bob Marley had already passed away almost 10 years. So his widow, Rita Marley, who's just an outstanding, powerful woman, hired me. And the person I was directly working under was a singer named Bob Andy. And I recommend anybody who's a reggae fan to go out and listen to Bob Andy, some of his work, and Rita Marley. A lot of people know Bob Marley in general, but you have a lot of other talented artists. So these people kind of took me in. They mentored me. They told me about the business. They told me about the history of the business. So it was really an amazing experience. And plus I was learning, I was right out of college. I was in a new city. I was just absorbing everything, that was coming my way. And it was pretty amazing, the sights, the sounds, the foods.
Yeah.
It was, I had grown up in Long Island, New York, and I went to school in Washington, D.C., pretty sheltered. And, I had traveled, but I hadn't seen what ghetto life was like until I got to Jamaica, and a third world city that, really had a lot of depressed areas, and going into those areas with the musicians to, find singers and stuff like that. It was just an amazing experience.
Yeah. You grow so much as a person, getting out there, experiencing the world. It's crazy. Even me being here in Florida, it's like so amazing to see different cultures. Like you get a completely different perspective on the world. Like I feel so comfortable back in Denmark. It's like socialistic country, coming over here to Florida, which is I wouldn't say the complete opposite, but the weather is the complete opposite. Even the weather does something different to your body, the food, everything you can take in from a different culture just shapes you completely. It's so fascinating. Love traveling so much.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And the other part of traveling is the people you get to meet when you're traveling, and the backgrounds and different backgrounds. So that always adds to the experience.
So what exactly did you do during your internship? Did you produce music?
Well, basically, like I said, I had been working for Bob Andy, was hired to be the creative director. So Tough Gong Music was Bob Marley's company. Was his dream was to own the means of production, because remember, this was Jamaica, and reggae music comes from the descendants of slaves. They had been controlled their whole life. So even in music, there was a system that was the corporate system. You had the studios that ran it. They produced the music. They owned the music. You were the artist. You got paid to come in, and you worked for them. Bob Marley was all about self-determination, self-reliance. So what he did was that he decided to start his company, Tough Gong Music, with Peter Tosh and Bunny Wailer, the original Wailers. His dream was to be all-encompassing, to control the music, to press the records, to distribute the records, everything. So he wouldn't need anybody else to rely on. That's what he sung about, and that's what he practiced, what he preached. So by the time I got there 10 years after he had passed away, Tough Gunk was already this burgeoning record company. It had a beautiful studio. It just moved into this amazing complex. So I was in the studio watching the music getting recorded, learning about the technological aspects of it. They had a record pressing plant where you would go down and actually pressing the vinyl off the machines
nice.
Putting the labels on it, and you'd get to see musicians and singers come and buy their records and come and hold it up and see their name on it, sung by so-and-so. And then the distribution aspect. They had a record store on premises, and people were traveling from all over the world to buy these records and sell them in their countries. So working at the record store, Japan, Brazil, everywhere in South America, everywhere in Europe, people were coming in, and they have these mom and pops record stores, and they'd be buying product. So it was amazing from the actual making of the product to the distribution to the buying of it. It was a great experience.
Yeah. And
that's where I made the decision. I said, this is what I want to do with my life. I want to do this.
So how long were you working with the Marleys?
So the Marley was with basically after college was 6 months Marleys.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I went back up, and that's when I went back up to Washington, D.C., and decided I was going to attempt to be a songwriter and produce my own music. And after 2 or 3 years, I got a job working in New York City for Island Records, one of the biggest reggae companies in the country. So I decided to put my dream on hold and go back into the corporate world because I needed to make money, and I was living at home and I was broke, and my father said get a job. So I got a job, and that basically opened up a whole new set of doors for me. And eventually, after working a year at Island Records, I decided to start my own label and move to Kingston, and decided to just go for broke.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine who, again, is the podcast, a friend of mine, Brian, who was kind of living this parallel life as me out in Colorado as he wanted to be a singer, and amazing voice, and he just loved reggae music, and we had met via phone as I was working for one of the companies. He was calling in asking about a record. So eventually we decided to team up, and me doing production and writing, him doing singing, and we took that trip down to Jamaica. We moved and we rented a house up in the hills. And season 2 of the Rootsland podcast will take place as we move down there into Jamaica, and all the adventures of setting up a studio in a house and
nice. Yeah.
Just trying to live our dream, pursue our dream in music.
Coming back to Jamaica.
Yeah, coming back to Jamaica.
That must have been awesome to come back.
Yeah. So basically, the way that the podcast runs, just to keep your listeners in. The season 1 was me doing my internship and just finding my way into the music business. And season 2 was actually working for the company up in New York, Island Records. And season 3 will be, again, following the dream and moving down there and starting from scratch and just seeing what we can build.
Nice.
So, it's great. I recommend everybody, all the listeners and viewers now, congratulations on the video and all that. But anyway, on the live show. But I recommend everybody, like you do, you gotta pursue your dream in life. You can't just sit around and watch the videos and other people and say, oh my God, I wish I can do it.
Nope.
You have one chance when you're young,
Exactly.
And you just got to do it, and you never know what doors are going to open up, and that's always how it's been for me.
And as we just talked about, everybody can do it if they just put their mind to it, especially nowadays. Like we just talked about, you have everything available to you. You have a laptop, a phone, you can do everything. Like we talked about TikTok as well. Everybody has a phone. Everybody can start making TikTok videos. Everybody can make something out of nothing. So I'm the exact same way. I encourage everybody to pursue their dreams. Just get after it. I think what's hard for people is the competition now, because everything is so available. Everybody's doing it as well. And just like podcasts, so many people have a podcast now, which is one of the reasons why I was hesitant to even start. I've always wanted to have a podcast for probably as long as I can remember, like as long as I'm not that old, since I was 10 years old maybe. But I always wanted to have a medium like a podcast, but I was afraid that, might not make it because there was so much competition, because everyone was doing it. But yeah, everybody just gotta try, do their thing, find out what you love, and pursue it. Yeah,
you find your own lane, exactly. I mean, especially just to take it back to reggae music and Jamaica and Bob Marley. I think a lot of the appeal of the music and Bob Marley Because people know this is a man that came from nothing.
Yeah.
You know, he came from a ghetto, and you know, he couldn't even afford a guitar growing up. And this is someone who became one of the most popular singers in the world. His you know, estate is behind Elvis and Michael Jackson. It earns more money than any other singer, you know, in history. So I think the lesson of reggae music is, and when you talk about competition, you don't need much to succeed. You just need the will.
Yeah.
And that's what Bob Marley and that's what reggae really talks about. And I think that's why it's so popular. Because not only are they out there, you know, singing about it, but these are, you know, Jamaicans in this generation, they lived it. They came from the least.
Yeah.
And they were able to travel the world and have an influence on the world, you know. And I think that if you worry about the competition, you're not going to be worrying about yourself.
That's true. That's very true. Yeah.
You know,
that is very true.
When I had met a couple of artists in Jamaica, and they were from the poorest area you could imagine, and they were just starting out in the industry. They took me up to a piece of land up in the mountains, a beautiful piece of land. They said, "Henry, look, you know, we got this piece of land from the crumbs of the music business. Imagine if we get a slice of the pie." And I said, "You guys, you can't. How did you even get this? I can't even imagine. This is more than I have, and I've been in this." They said, "Well, when we were young, you know, we went to a wedding, a family wedding. We went to a family wedding, and you know, we met a gentleman there who just looked like success. He had a suit and tie, and you know, we never saw anybody like that before in our lives. And we looked at him. We said, Mister, how do we get to be like you? You know, to be successful?" He said, "Guys, don't pay attention to anybody. Blaze a path and leave a trail for them, and just go forward."
Yeah.
And they said that's what we did. We didn't pay attention. Everybody was doing what they were doing. We just stayed straight and did what we did.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, you never see, I mean, I'm not sure if that's true, but I feel like typically the people who hate on others are always the losers, are always the ones that don't succeed. The ones that just stay in their own lanes are typically the ones that succeed, right? And those are the stories from people coming from nothing are always the best stories.
Yeah, they are. People
coming from nothing to just succeeding and winning in life is so inspiring. Like, I listen to a lot of Eminem, going back to hip hop and rap. You definitely say he came from nothing, living in a trailer, becoming one of the greatest artists of all time. Those stories are just so inspiring. It's amazing to look at somebody coming from nothing, and people who say they can't do something, who live like an average life, a middle class, you have to look at the people who came from nothing. Because if they can do it, so can you, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, sometimes maybe they, you know, even we talk about tennis, and to go back to Everett Academy and some of the things going, you find some of these kids who grow up in the country clubs and they have the good lives. They don't have the fire in the belly. Look at the Williams sisters. People come from their only way out is tennis, or your only way out is music. Sometimes that does give you a fire, and that's your competition. You know, that's why, you know, there's people out there that have fire in your belly. If you're going to do something, you can't do it, you know, half-assed. Excuse the language.
No,
you got to go all in on something. You know, so I mean, you can't worry about the competition, but you got to think about the fact that they're out there trying to take you, you know, what you're doing. So you got to just be focused.
Absolutely, yeah. Henry, I think that's where we're gonna leave it.
Okay.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks
I'm glad
for
we
having
finally
me.
got it to
All
work,
right.
man. Been excited to talk to you. And again, tell people where they can find
Oh yes,
the podcast.
the Rootsland podcast. It's available anywhere: Amazon, iTunes, Apple, wherever you get podcasts. There's a wonderful music soundtrack as well that's available anywhere you get music. Anybody who still buys music, but you can stream it as well. And I want to thank Patrick and wish him all the best on the future, and just stick with the dream.
Appreciate it. I recommend the Rootsland podcast. Go check it out. And I recommend this podcast as well. If you haven't already, subscribe, like, comment, all that good stuff. Appreciate it. See you later. Peace.